When someone abandons you in a public place, that's cruelty. When your own daughter leaves you stranded at a shopping mall like discarded merchandise, that's betrayal. When you discover you actually own that very mall and hold the power to evict her from more than just your heart, that's divine justice waiting to unfold. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that persistent buzz that seems to follow you everywhere when you're living paycheck to paycheck. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat on the hard plastic bench outside Bath & Body Works, watching families drift past me like I was invisible furniture. My name is Claudette Morrison, and at 64 years old, I'd learned that being forgotten was a skill my daughter had mastered to perfection. The mall directory across from me displayed a cheerful map of Westfield Commons Shopping Center, with its gleaming stores and promise of retail therapy for those who could afford such luxuries. I couldn't. My worn black purse contained exactly 23 47s, an expired coupon for Subway, and a phone with 8% battery life. Not exactly the tools for a shopping spree, but then again, I hadn't come here to shop. I'd been abandoned here 3 hours ago. The bench had become my throne of humiliation, positioned perfectly for maximum visibility. Teenage couples walked by sharing pretzels and dreams. Mothers pushed strollers while juggling coffee cups in toddlers' hands. Elderly couples moved slowly together, the kind of partnership I'd once imagined I'd have in my golden years before. My husband Mark died of a stroke at 52. That was 12 years ago. 12 years of raising our daughter Julia alone, of working double shifts at Morrison's department store downtown just to keep the lights on and her college fund growing. 12 years of choosing between my needs and hers, and her needs always winning because that's what mothers do. That's what I thought mothers were supposed to do. My phone vibrated with a text from Julia. Finally. Mom, something came up with the McLaughlin Foundation Charity Gala. This could change everything for my social standing. You understand, right? Take an Uber home. Love you. Love you. 2 words that used to warm my heart but now felt as empty as my bank account. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times as if the words might rearrange themselves into something resembling actual concern for my well-being. The McLaughlin Foundation. Of course. Julia's latest obsession with climbing the social ladder of Pine Valley's elite. Ever since she married Alvin Hartwell, the investment banker with the perfect teeth and the perfectly manicured life, my daughter had become someone I barely recognized. Gone was the girl who used to spend Saturdays helping me reorganize clearance racks at the store, replaced by a woman who spoke in whispers about networking opportunities and strategic social positioning. An Uber home would cost $34. I had $23.47. I opened my calculator app and ran the numbers again, as if mathematics might suddenly become more generous. Rent was due in 6 days. 8.90s. My pension from the store, $1,247 monthly. Electric bill, $156. Groceries, $280 if I was careful, which I always was. The prescription for my arthritis medication, $95 after insurance. Phone bill, $65. That left me with approximately $30 for everything else life might demand. Everything else, apparently, included being stranded at shopping malls by daughters who had more important places to be. A young mother with twin toddlers sat down beside me, juggling shopping bags and sippy cups with the kind of graceful chaos that comes from practice. One of the boys dropped his toy truck, and I automatically bent to retrieve it, my knees protesting the movement. "Thank you so much," she said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "You're a lifesaver." I smiled, the first real smile I'd managed all day. I remember those days. Double trouble, but double the joy, too. She laughed, bouncing the fussier twin on her knee. Some days feel more like triple trouble. Are you waiting for someone? The question hung in the air like incense, sweet and suffocating. Was I waiting for someone? Technically, yes. I was waiting for Julia to remember that she'd brought me here, that I existed, that I mattered enough to warrant a phone call instead of a dismissive text. "My daughter," I said simply. "She's busy." The young mother nodded with the kind of understanding that suggested she'd dealt with her own family complications. "Family can be complicated," she said gently. "I hope she's not too much longer." After she left, corralling her twins toward the Disney store, I sat alone again with my thoughts and the growing ache in my lower back from the unforgiving bench. The mall was beginning to thin out as dinner time approached. Stores were starting to dim their displays, and the custodial staff emerged with their wheeled carts and industrial mops. I thought about Julia's childhood, about the Christmas when I worked overtime for 6 weeks straight to afford the American Girl doll she'd circled obsessively in every catalog, about her high school graduation, where I sat in the front row beaming, with pride as she delivered the valedictorian speech, about her wedding day when I'd maxed out my credit card to pay for the flowers because Alvin's family has certain expectations, Mom, and we can't look cheap. I'd never looked cheap. I'd looked broke, which was different but apparently just as embarrassing. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sitting in a temple to consumerism, surrounded by stores I could never afford to shop in, abandoned by the person I'd sacrificed everything to provide for. Somewhere in this mall, teenagers were spending more on a single shopping trip than I had to live on for a month. Somewhere in Pine Valley, Julia was probably sipping champagne with people who'd never known what it felt like to choose between heating and eating. My phone died. The mall began its closing announcements, cheerful automated voices thanking shoppers for visiting and reminding everyone that customer service was available until 9 p.m. Security guards started their rounds, politely encouraging lingering teenagers to move along. I remained on my bench, now truly stranded, watching the custodial crew mop around me like I was just another piece of mall furniture. In the growing quiet, I could hear my own breathing, my own heartbeat, my own thoughts circling like vultures around the central question that had been haunting me for months. When had I become so expendable to the person I'd loved most in the world? Little did I know that within 48 hours, I'd have the power to answer that question in ways Julia never saw coming. The security guard who finally approached me was kind enough. His name tag read Lionel, and his eyes held the weariness of someone who'd seen too many difficult situations during his shifts. He was probably in his 50s, with graying temples and the gentle manner of someone who understood that life sometimes put good people in impossible positions. "Ma'am, we're closing up soon," he said, his voice soft with concern rather than authority. "Is there someone I can call for you?" I looked up at him, this stranger showing more genuine care than my own daughter had all day. "My ride fell through," I said, the euphemism tasting bitter on my tongue. "I'm just trying to figure out my options." Lionel glanced around the nearly empty mall, then back at me. "Tell you what," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "There's a 24-hour diner about 6 blocks from here, Mel's Place. They've got good coffee, and the owner, Mel, she's got a soft spot for folks having a rough night. You could wait there until morning, maybe catch a bus when they start running again." I wanted to cry at his kindness. Instead, I managed a grateful smile. "Thank you, Lionel. That's very thoughtful." "No problem." And hey, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. "Coffee's on me tonight. We all need help sometimes." This time I couldn't stop the tears. This man, this complete stranger, had shown me more compassion in 5 minutes than Julia had in months. I tried to refuse the money, but Lionel was insistent. "My mom's about your age," he said gently. "I'd hope someone would do the same for her if she needed it." As I walked the 6 blocks to Mel's Place, my feet aching in shoes that had seen better years, I thought about the sacrifices that had led me to this moment. Not just today's abandonment, but the accumulation of choices I'd made over the past 30 years, each one chipping away at my own foundation until I'd become as invisible as I felt. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Julia had been 3 when Mark died suddenly at work. One moment, he was reviewing quarterly reports. The next, he was on the floor of his office, gone before the paramedics arrived. The life insurance payout had been modest, enough to keep us afloat for about 8 months if we were careful. I'd been working part-time at Morrison's department store, mostly for the employee discount, and something to do while Julia was in preschool. Suddenly, I was the sole provider for both of us. I remembered the night I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by bills and bank statements, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. Julia's preschool tuition, the mortgage, groceries, utilities, car payments, everything that had seemed manageable with 2 incomes now loomed like impossible mountains. That's when I made the first sacrifice. I gave up my small studio apartment that I'd used for painting, my one creative outlet, and converted it into a rental unit. The extra $600 a month made the difference between keeping the house and losing everything. Then came the bigger sacrifices. I picked up full-time hours at Morrison's, then overtime whenever it was available. I learned to shop exclusively from the clearance racks and damaged goods section. I discovered which restaurants threw away perfectly good food at closing time and swallowed my pride enough to ask for it. But the real sacrifices were the invisible ones. The ones Julia never saw because I made sure she never had to. I gave up my subscription to the art magazine I'd loved since college. I sold my engagement ring to pay for Julia's first year of dance lessons because she'd fallen in love with ballet. I worked 3 consecutive Christmas Eves at the store, missing our traditional Christmas morning pancakes, so I could afford the bicycle she'd wanted all year. When Julia was in middle school and desperately wanted to attend summer camp with her friends, I sold my car and took the bus to work for 6 months to afford the fees. When she decided she wanted to play violin, I worked weekend shifts at a second job, cleaning offices, to pay for lessons and the instrument rental. Every choice was the same. Julia's happiness over my own needs. Julia's opportunities over my comfort. Julia's future over my present. I'd told myself it was temporary, that once she was older, more independent, things would balance out. That the sacrifices were an investment in our relationship, proof of my love that she would someday understand and appreciate. Mel's Place was exactly what Lionel had promised. A warm refuge with cracked vinyl booths and the smell of honest food. Mel herself was a sturdy woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. When I explained my situation, she simply nodded and pointed to a corner booth. "Coffee's fresh," she said. "Help yourself. And there's pie if you're hungry. Apple crumb. Made it this morning." I spent that long night in the diner, nursing coffee and watching the late shift workers come and go. Nurses heading home from the hospital, cab drivers taking breaks, insomniacs seeking companionship. Each person had a story, a reason for being there, and none of them looked at me with pity or judgment. As dawn broke over Pine Valley, painting the sky in soft pastels, I thought about all the mornings I'd watched Julia get ready for school, making sure she had everything she needed while ignoring my own empty coffee cup, my own rumbling stomach. I thought about the college visits where I'd driven her to 7 different states, sleeping in the car to save on hotel costs while she toured campuses I could never have afforded to attend myself. I thought about her wedding, where I'd worked, extra shifts for months to help pay for the reception, only to be seated at a back table with distant relatives while Alvin's family held court at the head table. I'd watched her dance with her new husband, radiant in a dress that cost more than my monthly rent, and felt proud despite the ache in my chest. The sacrifices had been worth it then. Julia was educated, married well, seemingly happy. So when exactly had I become expendable? When had my love become an obligation she resented rather than a gift she cherished? The morning bus back to my neighborhood cost $2.75. As I watched the familiar streets roll past the window, I realized I was returning to the same small apartment, the same financial struggles, the same invisibility I'd left behind the day before. But something had shifted during that long night at Mel's place. Something fundamental about how I saw myself and my worth in the world. I just didn't know yet how dramatically that shift was about to change everything. By the time I made it back to my apartment, the sun was fully up, and my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was already watering her small balcony garden. She waved at me with the kind of polite concern that suggested I looked exactly as rough as I felt. "Out early this morning, Claudette?" she asked, though it was clear from my appearance that I'd been out all night. "Something like that," I replied, fishing for my keys with hands that shook slightly from exhaustion and caffeine. My apartment felt smaller when I walked back into it, the walls seeming to close in with the weight of everything that had happened. I made coffee and sat at my tiny kitchen table staring at my phone. Still dead. Part of me was grateful for the silence, but as I plugged it in and waited for it to come back to life, I knew what I would find. Or rather, what I wouldn't find. No missed calls from Julia asking if I'd made it home safely. No texts expressing concern or apology. Just the same void that had become the soundtrack of our relationship. When the phone finally buzzed back to life, there was indeed nothing from Julia. But there were 3 missed calls from an unknown number with a Boston area code and a voicemail, left at 7:30 a.m. The voice on the message was crisp, professional, and completely unexpected. "Good morning, Mrs. Morrison. This is Bianca Chambers from the law firm of Hartfield, Chambers & Associates in Boston. I'm calling regarding the estate of Sonny Valdez. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. It's quite urgent, N.E.R. Valdez." I hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. I sat there holding the phone, memories flooding back like water through a broken dam. Sonny had been my business partner in what we'd laughingly called Morrison and Valdez Properties back in the early 1980s. We'd started with nothing but optimism and a shared belief that the retail real estate market was about to explode. We'd been right, but for all the wrong reasons. Sonny and I had met in a community college business class when Julia was barely 2 years old. He was this energetic guy with wild ideas about buying up small commercial properties and converting them into retail spaces. I was a young widow trying to figure out how to support myself and my daughter. Somehow, his enthusiasm had been infectious. We'd pooled our meager resources, my small inheritance from Mark's life insurance and Sonny's savings from working construction, and bought our first property. It was a rundown strip mall in what everyone said was a terrible location outside. Pine Valley. Everyone was wrong. Within 5 years, we owned 6 properties. Within 10 years, we were actually making decent money. But then, Sonny had gotten an opportunity to invest in a much larger development project in Florida. He'd needed capital, and the only way to get it was to buy out my share of our partnership. I'd been reluctant to sell. The business was finally providing stability for Julia and me. But Sonny had painted such a picture of the opportunity awaiting him, and he'd offered me enough money to pay off my mortgage completely and fund Julia's entire college education. In the end, how could I say no? I'd signed over my shares in Morrison and Valdez Properties for $85,000 in 1992. It had seemed like a fortune at the time. Enough to secure Julia's future and give me peace of mind. Sonny had moved to Florida and we'd gradually lost touch. Christmas cards for a few years, then nothing. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that his Florida venture had been successful, but that was decades ago. Now he was dead, and a lawyer was calling me about his estate. Called Bianca Chambers back with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Morrison?" Her voice was warm but businesslike. "Thank you for calling back so quickly. I have some rather surprising news regarding Mr. Valdez's will." "I'm sorry for your loss," I said automatically. "Sonny was a good man, but I'm not sure why you're calling me. We haven't been in contact for years." "That's what makes this so interesting," Bianca replied, Mr. Valdez never forgot about you, Mrs. Morrison. In fact, he'd been following your situation for quite some time. My situation. That was a delicate way of putting it. He amended his will 18 months ago, she continued. He left specific instructions that if anything happened to him, you were to be contacted immediately. Mrs. Morrison, are you sitting down? I was, but I gripped the edge of my kitchen table anyway. Mr. Valdez left you his entire share of Morrison and Valdez properties. All of it. The words didn't make sense. But I sold my share 30 years ago. There is no Morrison and Valdez properties anymore. Actually, there is. Mr. Valdez kept the name and continued to build the business. He never took on another partner. Morrison and Valdez Properties now owns 17 shopping centers across 3 states, including several major mall properties. Mrs. Morrison, you've just inherited half of a business worth approximately $23 million. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the kitchen table. $23 million. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? The current valuation is just over $23 million. Your inheritance, as the 50% partner outlined in Mr. Valdez's will, would be approximately $11.5 million before taxes. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was telling me. Mrs. Morrison, are you still there? Yes, I whispered. I'm here. There's more. According to our records, one of the properties in the Morrison and Valdez portfolio is Westfield Commons Shopping Center in Pine Valley. I believe that's your hometown? Westfield Commons, the mall where Julia had abandoned me less than 24 hours ago. Mrs. Morrison, I know this is a lot to take in. Would you be able to come to our Boston office sometime this week? There are papers to sign, and I think it would be helpful to go through everything in person. I agreed to meet her Thursday morning, though I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to get to Boston or what I was going to wear to a law office that probably didn't see many clients who shopped exclusively at thrift stores. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the wall for what felt like hours. The same wall I'd been staring at for 12 years, with its water stain shaped vaguely like Texas and the paint that had been peeling since I moved in. $11.5 million, owner of Westfield Commons Shopping Center. The irony was so profound it felt like a physical weight in my chest. Yesterday, I'd been abandoned in that mall like forgotten property. Today, I owned it. I thought about Julia, probably waking up in her beautiful home, maybe feeling a tiny bit guilty about last night, but certainly not enough to actually call and check on me. She had no idea that while she was networking with Pine Valley's elite, her mother had just become one of the wealthiest women in the state. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I smiled a real smile. Not the polite, accommodating smile I'd perfected over years of making do with less. Not the grateful smile I gave to people like Lionel and Mel when they showed me unexpected kindness. This was something entirely different. This was the smile of someone who had just realized that the game was about to change completely, and Julia had no idea what was coming. I didn't call Julia to tell her about the inheritance. Not immediately. Some instinct I'd learned to trust over the years of navigating difficult situations told me to wait, to understand what I was dealing with before I shared it with anyone. Instead, I spent the next 2 days researching everything I could about Morrison and Valdez properties. What I discovered in those quiet hours hunched over the computer at the public library made my head spin. Sonny hadn't just continued our business, he'd turned it into an empire. The company now owned shopping centers from Massachusetts to Virginia. Premium locations, many of them anchored by major department stores. The financial statements I could access online showed consistent profitability, even during economic downturns. Sonny had built something remarkable from the foundation we'd started together all those years ago. And according to Bianca Chambers, half of it was now mine. But it was the list of properties that made my hands shake as I scrolled through them. Westfield Commons wasn't just any mall in the portfolio, it was one of the flagship properties. The same mall where I'd sat abandoned on that plastic bench, feeling invisible and worthless, was generating over $2 million in annual revenue. The irony was so profound it felt orchestrated by some cosmic sense of justice. On Wednesday evening, my phone finally rang. Julia's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I felt that old familiar flutter of hope. Maybe she was calling to apologize. Maybe she'd finally realized how badly she'd treated me. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was bright, cheerful, completely devoid of guilt or concern. "Sorry I haven't called sooner. It's been absolutely crazy with the foundation. Events. Not, 'Are you okay?' Not, 'Did you make it home safely?' Just an excuse wrapped in the same self-absorbed tone that had become her default setting. "I'm sure it has been," I said carefully. "The McLaughlin Gala was incredible, Mom. I mean, really transformative for our social connections." Alvin made some amazing contacts, and Mrs. McLaughlin herself complimented my dress. Can you believe it? She actually said I had impeccable taste. Coming from someone like her, that's huge. I listened to her chatter about the party she'd abandoned me for, feeling something cold and hard forming in my chest. She talked about the catered dinner, the live orchestra, the silent auction where single items sold for more than I lived on in a month. She mentioned meeting fascinating people and making plans for future charity work. Never once did she ask about me. "That sounds wonderful, Julia," I said when she finally paused for breath. "I'm glad you had such a meaningful evening." "Oh, I did. And speaking of meaningful, I have some exciting news. Alvin and I have been talking, and we've decided to buy a vacation home in the Hamptons. Not huge, just a modest little place where we can host weekend gatherings for our social circle. You know how important it is to maintain those relationships. A vacation home in the Hamptons. While her mother ate soup from a can and wore coats indoors to save on heating bills. That's quite an investment, I managed. Well, Alvin says we need to think of it as networking infrastructure. These aren't just personal relationships, they're business opportunities. The McLaughlin Foundation has connections to some of the most influential people in New England. If we play our cards right, this could open doors Alvin's never even dreamed of. Networking infrastructure. That's what they were calling a luxury vacation home now. Actually, Mom, I'm calling because I wanted to ask you something. Here it came. The real reason for the call. Alvin's mother is having some financial difficulties. Nothing major, just some unexpected medical bills. We were wondering if you might have any suggestions for assistance programs? You know, for seniors who need help with expenses? I stared at the wall, processing what she'd just said. They were buying a vacation home in the Hamptons while asking me to help find charity programs for Alvin's mother's medical bills. What kind of medical bills? I asked. Oh, nothing life-threatening. She needs some dental work, and her Medicare doesn't cover cosmetic procedures. But you know how important appearance is for someone her age. She's so embarrassed about her teeth that she barely leaves the house anymore. Cosmetic dental work. They wanted me to find charity programs to help pay for cosmetic dental work for a woman whose son was buying vacation homes. Julia, I said, slowly. Are you asking me to help you find financial assistance for optional dental procedures while you're purchasing a second home? There was a pause. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds... I mean, these are two completely separate issues, Mom. Alvin's business success doesn't mean we should have to pay for his mother's personal expenses. But you expect me to research charity programs for her? You're so good at that kind of thing, she said, as if navigating poverty assistance programs was some kind of hobby I enjoyed. And you have time to make calls during the day. I'm just so busy with the foundation work. Time. She thought I had time because I was poor and unemployed, and therefore available to handle her inconveniences. I'll see what I can find, I heard myself saying, falling back into the old pattern of accommodation. You're the best, Mom. Oh, and one more tiny favor. Alvin's firm is hosting a client appreciation dinner next month, and we need some items. For the silent auction. Nothing expensive, just handmade crafts or local artisan stuff. You know, for that authentic charm factor. Could you maybe put together a basket of homemade things? Cookies, maybe a scarf you knitted? People love that rustic homespun aesthetic. Rustic. Homespun. Code words for cheap enough that we don't have to spend our vacation home money on it. She wanted me to donate my labor to help them impress their wealthy friends with my poverty crafts. Sure, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. I can do that. Perfect. You're such a lifesaver. I have to run. We're meeting the Hamptons realtor in an hour. Love you. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the dead phone, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. It wasn't just anger, though, that was certainly part of it. It was clarity. Pure, crystalline understanding of exactly where I stood in my daughter's priorities. I was useful, a resource to be tapped when needed, someone to research charity programs for other people's optional expenses while they bought luxury vacation. Homes. Someone to craft auction items from my poverty so they could impress people who spent more on wine than I had for groceries. But I was not valued. I was not cherished. I was not even considered worthy of basic concern after being abandoned at a shopping mall. Tomorrow, I would drive to Boston and sign papers that would make me one of the wealthiest women in Massachusetts. But tonight, I sat in my cold apartment, wearing 2 sweaters to save on heat, while my daughter planned her second home purchase and asked me to make cookies for her husband's business associates. The woman who answered that phone tomorrow would be very different from the one who had just hung up. Julia had no idea that the mother she treated like a charity case was about to become the woman who owned the ground her world was built on. The train to Boston felt like a journey to another world. I'd bought the cheapest ticket available and sat in a window seat, watching the Massachusetts countryside blur past while I clutched a manila folder containing every document I thought I might need. I'd dressed in my best outfit, a navy blue blazer I'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago and pressed until it looked almost professional, paired with my one good pair of black slacks. I'd even splurged on a new lipstick at the drugstore, something I hadn't done in over a year. The reflection in the train window showed a woman I barely recognized. Not because I looked different exactly, but because something in my eyes had changed. There was a steadiness there that hadn't existed 3 days ago, a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. Bianca Chambers's office was in a gleaming tower in downtown Boston, the kind of building I'd always hurried past when I'd visited the city, assuming I didn't belong there. The lobby was all marble and brass, with security guards who looked like they were used to dealing with people who owned things rather than people who cleaned them. "I'm here to see Bianca Chambers," I told the receptionist, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Of course, Mrs. Morrison. She's expecting you." The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt endless. When the doors opened, I stepped into a reception area that probably cost more to decorate than I'd earned in the past 5 years. But instead of feeling intimidated, I felt something unexpected. Recognition. This was where I belonged. Not because of the money, though that was certainly a factor now, but because I'd earned my place here through 30 years of sacrifice and hard work. Bianca Chambers was nothing like I'd expected. She was younger than me, probably in her early 40s, with short auburn hair and a warm smile that reached her eyes. Her office was elegant but comfortable, with family photos on her desk and a coffee station that looked well used. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, standing to greet me. "I'm so glad you could make it. Please sit down. Can I get you some coffee?" As she poured coffee from an expensive-looking machine, she began explaining the details of Sonny's will. The man I'd tied to her, known as an enthusiastic dreamer, had become a methodical business genius, building Morrison and Valdez Properties into one of the most successful privately held real estate companies in New England. "He never married," Bianca explained. handing me a steaming mug. "No children. But he kept track of you all these years, Mrs. Morrison. He knew about your husband's death, your struggles as a single mother, your work at the department store." The idea that Sonny had been watching over me from a distance was both comforting and unsettling. But why leave it to me? We hadn't spoken in decades. Bianca opened a thick folder and pulled out a handwritten letter. "He left this for you." The paper was expensive, cream-colored with Sonny's bold handwriting sprawled across it in blue ink. "Claudette," it began, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're probably confused as hell about why you're suddenly rich. Let me explain. I never stopped thinking about Morrison and Valdez as our company. Yes, I bought out your share, but only because you needed the money more than you needed the stress of running a business while raising Julia alone. I always intended for you to benefit from what we built together. I've been keeping tabs on you, and I know how your life has gone. I know about the sacrifices you made for your daughter. I know about the jobs you worked, the corners you cut, the dreams you postponed indefinitely. I know because I hired a private investigator 5 years ago when I started getting sick. What I found out made me furious and heartbroken. Not at you, never at you, but at how the world treated someone who gave everything to the people she loved. You deserve better, Claudette. You always did. This inheritance isn't charity. It's justice. It's the return on an investment you made 30 years ago when you trusted me with your future. Every shopping center we own, every dollar, and profit we've made, half of it was always yours in my mind. Use it wisely. Use it to finally put yourself first for once in your life. Your old partner and eternal friend, Sonny P.S. I made sure to acquire Westfield Commons 3 years ago when it went up for sale. I had a feeling it might come in handy someday. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the letter. Sonny had bought Westfield Commons 3 years ago. He'd known somehow that it would matter. "Mrs. Morrison?" Bianca's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" I looked up at her, and for the first time in years, I laughed, really laughed. "He bought them all," I said, though I knew she couldn't understand why that was so significant. He actually bought them all. The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork, signatures, and explanations of financial instruments I'd never dreamed of owning. Bank accounts were established. Investment portfolios were transferred. Legal documents were signed and notarized. When it was over, I walked out of that building as one of the wealthiest women in Massachusetts. But more than that, I walked out with something I hadn't felt in decades. Power. Not the kind of power that comes from hurting others, but the kind that comes from finally having choices. Real choices. The power to say no. The power to walk away. The power to set the terms of my own life for the first time since Mark died. As I rode the train back to Pine Valley, I thought about Julia's phone call the night before, about her request for charity research and homemade crafts, about her casual assumption that I would be available to solve her problems while she bought vacation homes. Tomorrow, Julia would call to check on my progress with her requests. Tomorrow, I would have some very different conversations with my daughter. The first thing I did when I returned to Pine Valley was nothing. I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by the same cracked walls and worn furniture, and simply absorbed what had happened. In the space of 48 hours, I had gone from being a woman who counted quarters to buy groceries to someone who owned 17 shopping centers across 3 states. But more than the money, what had changed was my perspective. For the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking about what I couldn't afford. I was thinking about what I could choose. The second thing I did was call a different kind of professional service than I'd ever needed before. "Personal shopping consultation." The woman's voice was crisp and professional. "This is Nadine." "Yes, I need help with a complete wardrobe update," I said, still getting used to the idea that I could make such a request. "Everything. Professional clothing, casual wear, shoes, accessories. I have a budget of—" I paused, remembering that I actually had no budget limitations anymore. I have a substantial budget. Nadine's appointment book was full, but when I mentioned I was willing to pay premium rates for immediate service, she found time for me the next morning. The transformation began at Nordstrom. Nadine was a woman in her 50s with an eye for both quality and appropriateness. She didn't ask why I needed an entirely new wardrobe, and I didn't volunteer the information. We simply worked methodically through the store, selecting pieces that would take me from my current life to whatever came next. "You have excellent bone structure," she said as I tried on a tailored navy suit that cost more than my monthly rent. "These classic cuts work beautifully on you." I stared at my reflection in the three-way mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I recognized but hadn't seen in years. Confident, put together. Someone who belonged in boardrooms and upscale restaurants. "I'll take it," I said. We moved through the store like generals planning a campaign. 2 business suits, 3 blazers, elegant blouses, well-fitted slacks, a little black dress that made me look 10 years younger, shoes that were comfortable, but expensive, handbags that would last for decades, accessories that spoke of quiet wealth rather than flashy display. The total came to just over $8,000. 6 months ago, that number would have sent me into panic. Today, I handed over my new credit card without flinching. "Would you like everything delivered?" the saleswoman asked. "No," I said, surprising myself. "I'll wear the navy suit. Have everything else delivered to this address by tomorrow." I walked out of Nordstrom wearing clothes that fit properly for the first time in years, carrying myself differently. People noticed. The security guard nodded respectfully. The valet at the hotel restaurant where I stopped for lunch called me, "Ma'am," with genuine deference, but the real transformation wasn't in the clothes. It was in the way I moved through the world, the way I occupied space, the way I responded to others. When the pushy salesman at the car dealership tried to steer me toward the economy models, I simply smiled and asked to see the luxury sedans. When he hesitated, clearly doubting my ability to afford them, I handed him my business card, newly printed with Claudette Morrison, partner, Morrison and Valdez Properties, in elegant script. "I'll need something reliable for frequent business travel," I said calmly. "What would you recommend?" An hour later, I drove off the lot in a pearl gray Lexus sedan that handled like a dream and made no apologies for its quality. That evening, I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment, wearing my new clothes in my old surroundings. The contrast was jarring but somehow fitting. I was still the same woman who had sat on that mall bench 3 days ago, but I was also someone entirely different. My phone rang. Julia's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in on those favors I asked about. Have you had a chance to research those assistance programs for Alvin's mother?" Her tone was expectant, assuming I'd spent my day navigating bureaucracy on her behalf while she pursued her more important activities. "Actually, Julia, I've been quite busy with my own affairs." There was a pause. My tone was different and she'd noticed. "Oh. Well, when you get a chance. And what about the auction? Basket? The client dinner is next Friday." I looked at my reflection again, at the confident woman in the expensive suit standing in the shabby apartment. Soon I would move to a home worthy of my new circumstances. Soon I would officially take my place in the business Sonny had built. But first, I had some conversations to finish. "Julia, I think we need to talk. In person, tomorrow." "Tomorrow? I'm not sure I can. I have a committee meeting for the spring fundraiser, and then Alvin and I are meeting with the interior designer for the Hamptons house. Cancel them." The word came out with an authority I hadn't used with her in years. Decades, maybe. "Mom, are you feeling okay? You sound different." "I'm feeling clearer than I have in a very long time. We need to meet tomorrow, Julia. 2 o'clock, at Westfield Commons, the food court." "The mall? Why would we meet there? Can't you just come to the house?" 2 o'clock, I repeated. "Food court. I have something important to discuss with you. I hung up before she could argue further. Tomorrow, Julia would discover that her mother was no longer the woman she could abandon on a bench, dismiss with casual requests, or treat as a convenient resource for her social climbing. Tomorrow, the lesson would begin. Julia arrived at Westfield Commons 20 minutes late, which didn't surprise me. What did surprise me was her outfit, designer jeans that probably cost more than my old monthly grocery budget, paired with a cashmere sweater and boots that clicked authoritatively across the mall's polished floors. She found me sitting at the same table in the food court where I'd eaten countless solitary meals over the years, nursing coffee and waiting for her to remember I existed. But today was different. Today, I wasn't the desperate woman who'd been abandoned here. Today, I was the woman who owned the building she was walking through. Mom? She slid into the plastic chair across from me, looking around the food court with barely concealed distaste. Are you okay? You sounded so strange on the phone yesterday. And why did we have to meet here of all places? I studied her face, looking for any sign that she remembered this was where she'd left me stranded 4 days ago. Nothing. It might as well have happened to someone else entirely. You look different, she continued, taking in my new suit and professional appearance. Did you get your hair done? And that's a nice blazer. Where did you get it? Nordstrom, I said simply. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Julia knew exactly how much Nordstrom clothes cost, and she knew exactly how little money I had. Or thought she knew. Nordstrom? Mom, that must have been expensive. Are you sure you should be spending money on clothes right now? I mean, with your fixed income and everything. My financial situation has changed recently. Changed how? There was a sharpness in her voice now, the tone she used when she suspected someone of being irresponsible with money. Mom, please tell me you didn't take out some kind of loan or get one of those credit cards with terrible interest rates. Because if you're in debt, Alvin and I can help you budget. I inherited money, Julia. The words stopped her mid-sentence. She blinked, processing this information like a computer trying to run a program it wasn't designed for. Inherited? From who? You don't have any living relatives except that cousin in Oregon you never talked to. From my former business partner, Sonny Valdez. Business partner? Julia's voice went up an octave. Mom, you worked at a department store. You never had a business partner. For 35 years, I'd been just Mom to Julia. Not a person with a history, not someone who'd had dreams and ambitions and partnerships before she was born. Just the woman who'd appeared in her life fully formed to meet her needs. Before you were born, and for several years after, I co-owned a real estate company. When your father died, I sold my share to focus on raising you. Sonny continued building the business. He died recently and left me everything. Julia stared at me like I'd just announced I was secretly a spy. Everything? What kind of everything? 17 shopping centers across 3 states, including this one. I watched her eyes dart around the food court, taking in the busy restaurants, the steady stream of shoppers, the obvious prosperity of the space around us. I could practically see her mental calculator running numbers. You own this mall? Half of it, technically. But yes, I'm now a partner in Morrison and Valdez Properties. The color drained from her face. Morrison and Valdez? That was your company? Still is, apparently. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from my face to my expensive clothes to the bustle of commerce surrounding us. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Careful. Mom, this is incredible news. I mean, I had no idea about your business background. You never asked. The simple truth hung between us like smoke. In all our conversations about her career, her husband's career, their networking and social climbing, she'd never once inquired about my life before motherhood. I'd been reduced to a function rather than a person. How much? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Then she flushed. I mean, not that it matters, of course. I'm just happy for you. It's wonderful that you'll be more comfortable now. Approximately $11.5 million before taxes. Julia's plastic water bottle crinkled in her grip. $11.5 million was more money than she and Alvin had ever dreamed of having, even with his successful career and their carefully calculated social climbing. 11. She couldn't finish the sentence. Million. Yes. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it automatically. Oh God, that's Alvin. I was supposed to meet him at the design center 15 minutes ago. She looked up at me and I could see the gears turning. Mom, we should celebrate this. This is huge. Why don't you come to dinner tonight? I'll cook something special, and we can toast your good fortune. For the first time in years, Julia was inviting me to her home. Not for babysitting duties or to help with some task, but as a guest. Because now I was worth her time. That sounds lovely, I said. But I should mention I've made some changes to my living situation as well. Changes? I've purchased a home in Beacon Heights. Beacon Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in Pine Valley, where houses started at $2 million, and Alvin had always dreamed of living. Julia's mouth opened slightly, then closed. When? Yesterday. I move in next week. She was struggling to reconcile the mother she'd known, the one she'd left stranded at this very mall, with the woman sitting across from her now. The woman who could afford to buy houses in neighborhoods Julia herself couldn't access. I should go, she said, standing abruptly. Alvin's waiting. But Mom, we need to talk more about this. About your plans, your investments. I mean, Alvin has a lot of experience with wealth management, and we'd hate to see you make any mistakes with such a substantial sum. There it was. The real reason for the sudden dinner invitation. They wanted to manage my money. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to discuss my plans, I said. After all, we'll practically be neighbors now. As she hurried away, clicking across the marble floors in her expensive boots, I remained sitting in the food court I now owned. 4 days ago, I'd been abandoned here like unwanted baggage. Today, I'd watched my daughter's entire worldview shift as she realized her poor, disposable mother had become someone she needed to cultivate. The transformation wasn't just mine, it was hers too. And she had no idea how much more was about to change. The dinner invitation from Julia came exactly 2 hours after our mall meeting, delivered via text with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard from her in years. Mom, Alvin and I are so excited about your news. Can you come for dinner tomorrow? 7 p.m.? We have so much to discuss. The emoji was a nice touch. Julia had never used heart emojis in text to me before. I spent that evening in my small apartment for what I knew would be one of the last times, surrounded by moving boxes and the detritus of a life lived small. Tomorrow, I would begin moving into the Beacon Heights house I'd purchased sight unseen, chosen primarily because it was 3 streets away from Julia and Alvin's carefully mortgaged dream home. But tonight, I had planning to do. I called Bianca Chambers despite the late hour. Mrs. Morrison, her voice was warm even at 9 p.m. How can I help you? I need to understand my options regarding the shopping centers. Specifically, what kind of control I have over leasing decisions, tenant management, that sort of thing. You have complete authority as a 50% partner. Any major decisions require consultation with the property management company we use, but ultimately, you have veto power over any lease agreements, renewals, or terminations. Why do you ask? Just planning ahead, I said, and I need to set up a meeting with our accountants and property managers. I want to understand every aspect of the business. Of course. I'll arrange that for next week. Anything specific you're looking to change? Nothing immediate. I just want to know what's possible. After I hung up, I made a list. Not a to-do list, but something more strategic. A catalog of every favor Julia had asked of me over the past 2 years, every assumption she'd made about my availability, every moment she'd treated me as a convenience rather than a person. The charity research for Alvin's mother's cosmetic dental work, the handmade auction basket for their networking event, the babysitting requests when their regular sitter was unavailable, the airport runs when their car was in the shop, the holiday, hosting when her in-laws visited but their house wasn't quite ready for entertaining. Each item represented a pattern of behavior that had become so normalized that Julia didn't even see it anymore. I had become the family member you called when you needed something done but didn't want to pay for it or prioritize it yourself. That was about to change. Julia's house was everything mine wasn't: spacious, modern, perfectly decorated in the kind of neutral tones that said we consulted a professional. I rang the doorbell at exactly 7 p.m., holding a bottle of wine that cost more than Julia used to spend on groceries in a week. "Mom!" Julia opened the door with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery winners. "You look amazing. Come in. Come in." Alvin appeared behind her, his smile broad and genuine in a way it had never been before. "Claudette, so wonderful to see you, and congratulations on your incredible good fortune." Good fortune. As if my inheritance was something that had happened to me randomly, rather than the result of 30 years of partnership and friendship with Sonny. The dining room table was set with their wedding china, the expensive stuff they usually saved. For Alvin's business associates, candles, cloth napkins, the works. I was getting the full treatment. "We wanted tonight to be special," Julia said as she poured wine. "A celebration of this amazing new chapter in your life. And we have some ideas," Alvin added, settling into his chair with the confident manner of someone about to solve all my problems, "about how to maximize this opportunity." "Oh? Well," Julia leaned forward eagerly, "Alvin has been thinking about your situation all day. And the thing is, Mom, wealth of this magnitude requires careful management. You could very easily make mistakes that would cost you millions." "What kind of mistakes?" "Tax implications, for one thing," Alvin said, launching into what was clearly a prepared speech. "Estate planning, investment diversification, charitable giving strategies. There are so many moving pieces to consider." "Fortunately," Julia jumped in, "Alvin's firm specializes in exactly this kind of wealth management. He could take care of everything for you." "For a very reasonable fee, of course," Alvin added quickly. "Family rates?" I sipped my wine. An excellent vintage that they'd probably been saving for a special occasion, and listened to their carefully rehearsed presentation. They'd clearly spent the afternoon planning this conversation, dividing up talking points like campaign strategists. "And there's the social aspect to consider," Julia continued. "I mean, you'll be moving in different circles now. The charity, boards, the cultural institutions, the networking events. It can be overwhelming if you don't know the right people. Luckily, through our foundation work, Julia has connections to all the right social circles," Alvin said proudly. "She could introduce you around, help you establish yourself." "That's very thoughtful," I said. "Both of you." They exchanged a quick glance, the kind of wordless communication that said they thought this was going well. "Actually," Julia said, her voice taking on a slightly different tone, "there is one small thing. You remember those favors I mentioned? The charity research and the auction basket?" "Of course." "Well, now that your situation has changed so dramatically, I was thinking, maybe instead of researching assistance programs for Alvin's mother, you could just help her directly? I mean, the dental work is only about $15,000. For someone in your position now, that's practically pocket change." There it was. The real reason for the celebration dinner, the special china, the carefully planned presentation about wealth management. They wanted me to write checks. I set down my wine glass and smiled at both of them. "You know what? I think that's an excellent idea. In fact, I think we should discuss a more formal arrangement for how I can contribute to the family going forward. Their faces lit up like Christmas morning. What I'm thinking, I continued, is a system where family members can earn financial support through specific contributions to my well-being and happiness. The smiles flickered slightly. What kind of contributions? Julia asked carefully. Oh, just the kinds of things loving family members do naturally. Regular visits, thoughtful gestures, genuine interest in each other's lives. The sorts of behaviors that demonstrate real care rather than just obligation. I could see them processing this, trying to understand what I was proposing. It would be like a reverse charity, I explained. Instead of me giving you things, you'd earn the privilege of my generosity through consistent, measurable acts of genuine family devotion. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Are you saying you'd pay us to spend time with you? Alvin asked slowly. I'm saying that since our relationships seem to work better when there are clear expectations and concrete benefits, we should make that arrangement official. And documented. Julia's fork clattered against her plate. Mom, that's not how families work, isn't it? I asked. Isn't that exactly how we've been working for the past few years? The contract arrived by email 3 days later. Family Enrichment Agreement, Julia had titled it, as if putting a corporate name on our relationship would make it more palatable. The document was surprisingly detailed, clearly drafted with Alvin's legal background in mind. Weekly phone calls, minimum 30 minutes, substantive conversation required. Monthly visits, minimum 4 hours, including shared meals. Holiday participation, all major celebrations, with advance notice for planning. Emergency availability, response within 2 hours for urgent family matters. In exchange, quarterly payments of $25,000, with performance bonuses for exceptional family engagement. I read through the terms while sitting in my new home office, surrounded by moving boxes and the smell of fresh paint. The Beacon Heights house was everything my old apartment wasn't. Spacious, bright, with views of manicured gardens instead of parking lots. But even in this beautiful space, the contract felt like a perversion of everything a family relationship should be. Still, I signed it. The first performance review period began immediately. Julia called that Sunday evening, exactly as scheduled. Hi. Mom, how are you settling into the new house? Her voice had taken on a carefully modulated tone, bright and attentive, but somehow artificial, like a customer service representative who'd been trained to sound caring. Very well, thank you. The movers finished yesterday. That's wonderful. And how's the neighborhood? Are you meeting any of your new neighbors? I could hear the effort in her voice, the conscious attempt to show interest in my daily life. For 20 minutes, she asked questions about paint colors, furniture arrangements, and local restaurants with the focused attention of someone taking notes for a quiz. When the conversation reached exactly 30 minutes, she wrapped up with practiced efficiency. Well, I should let you go, but this was so nice, Mom. I'm so glad we're staying in better touch now. Better touch. As if our previous relationship had been a communication problem rather than a fundamental lack of interest in my existence. The monthly visits followed the same pattern. Julia would arrive at my house with a cheerful smile and an agenda that felt rehearsed. She'd admire changes I'd made, ask appropriate questions about my daily routine, and share carefully selected updates about her own life. But it was all performance. I could see her checking the time, calculating how many hours she'd been there, making sure she hit all the required conversational topics. When Alvin joined these visits, he brought the same professional enthusiasm he probably used with difficult clients. The breaking point came during their third monthly visit. We were sitting in my new sunroom, drinking coffee from expensive cups Julia had complimented twice, when her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it quickly, then typed a response. Still at Mom's. 2 more hours to go. She thought she'd been subtle, holding the phone below the table. But I'd seen it clearly. 2 more hours to go. As if spending time with me was a prison sentence she was serving for money. I set down my coffee cup and looked at both of them. My daughter and son-in-law sitting in my beautiful home, performing affection for quarterly payments while counting down the minutes until they could leave. "You know what?" I said quietly. "I think we need to discuss whether this arrangement is working for any of us." The silence that followed my observation was thick enough to cut. Julia and Alvin exchanged glances, both clearly calculating how to respond to what I'd just said. "Mom," Julia began carefully, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not here because of your money. We're here because we love you and want to celebrate your good fortune." "Are you?" I asked quietly. "Because 3 weeks ago, when I was still poor, you left me stranded at Westfield Commons for 4 hours. Do you remember that, Julia?" Her face went pale. What are you talking about?" 3 weeks ago, you took me to the mall for what you called a mother-daughter day. Then you got a call about the McLaughlin Foundation Gala and left me there with no way to get home." I told you to take an Uber." "With what money, Julia? I had $23 in my purse. An Uber home would have cost $34. Alvin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly wishing he could be anywhere else. "I sat on that bench for 4 hours, I continued, my voice steady but quiet, watching families shop together, feeling invisible, wondering when my own daughter would remember she'd brought me there. A security guard finally helped me find a place to wait until the buses started running again." Julia's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. "But that's not the worst part," I said. "The worst part is that in the 3 weeks since then, you never asked if I made it home safely. You never apologized. You never even acknowledged that it happened. Until today, when you discovered I had something you wanted. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You had no idea because you didn't care enough to have an idea, just like you. Had no idea I once owned a business, because you never asked about my life before I became useful to you." Tears were forming in Julia's eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from guilt or frustration at being called out so directly. "And now," I continued, "you want to manage my money, introduce me to your social circles, help me navigate my new, wealthy life. But 3 weeks ago, I wasn't worth a phone call to make sure I got home safely." "That's not fair," Alvin interjected, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "People make mistakes. Julia's been under a lot of stress with the foundation." "Work? Stress?" I turned to look at him. "You think stress justifies abandoning your mother at a shopping mall? Tell me, Alvin, what would happen if Julia treated one of your clients the way she treated me that day?" He didn't answer. "I'll tell you what would happen. She'd be fired. Because no professional would tolerate being treated as disposable then, expected to be grateful for attention when it became convenient." Julia was crying now, real tears that might have been genuine remorse, or might have been panic at watching her financial opportunity slip away. "I love you, Mom," she whispered. "I really do." "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you love what I can do for you? Because I've been watching both of you very carefully these past few months, and I'm not sure you know the difference anymore." The question hung in the air between us, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I knew the difference anymore either. The unexpected visitor arrived the next morning. I was sitting in my garden, drinking coffee, and watching the sunrise paint the sky in soft pastels when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a young woman I didn't recognize, early 30s, with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm sorry to bother you so early. My name is Nadine Walsh. I work at Westfield Commons in the management office." I invited her in, curious about why a mall employee would be visiting my home at 7 in the morning. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she said, accepting my offer of coffee. "But Lionel, he's one of our security guards. He told me about what happened a few weeks ago, when you were waiting for your ride." Lionel, the kind man who had given me $20 and directed me to Mel's place. "Lionel's a good man," I said. "He is. And he's been worried about you. When he saw you at the mall yesterday with your daughter, he was so relieved to see you looking well. But then, she hesitated, clearly struggling with whether to continue. Then, what? He overheard part of your conversation. About the contracts and the payments. Mrs. Morrison, Lionel asked me to come here because he's concerned that you might be making a mistake. I studied her face, trying to understand what had motivated this stranger to drive to my house before most people were awake. What kind of mistake? Nadine set down her coffee cup and looked directly at me. I lost my mother 2 years ago. Cancer. And for the last 6 months of her life, I did exactly what your daughter is doing now. Going through the motions, checking boxes, fulfilling obligations because I thought I had to. Her voice caught slightly. I was so focused on being the good daughter that I forgot to actually connect with her. I scheduled visits, made appropriate conversation, handled her affairs efficiently. But I never just sat with her. Never asked what she was really thinking, about or feeling. I'm sorry for your loss, I said, meaning it. Thank you. But here's the thing, my mother knew. She could tell the difference between duty and love, just like you can with your daughter. And instead of calling me out on it, she just accepted it. She died thinking that going through the motions was the best she deserved from me. Nadine leaned forward, her expression earnest. Mrs. Morrison, you have the power to fix this, but not by paying your daughter to pretend to care. That's just making the problem worse. Then what would you suggest? Stop the contract. Stop the payments. Let her choose whether to have a relationship with you based on who you are, not what you can give her. And if she chooses to walk away, then you'll know where you really stand. And knowing the truth, even if it hurts, is better than living in a performance forever. I walked to the window, looking out at the manicured perfection of Beacon Heights. Everything here was beautiful, carefully maintained, impressive, just like the relationship I'd constructed with Julia. But what if I'm not enough? I asked quietly. What if, without the money, there's nothing there worth staying for? Nadine joined me at the window. Mrs. Morrison, do you really want to spend the rest of your life wondering? Because that's what you're choosing right now. A lifetime of uncertainty disguised as control. Her words hit with unexpected force. I had gained the power to make Julia dance to my tune, but I'd lost any chance of knowing if she actually wanted to dance with me at all. You own that mall where this all started, Nadine continued. You could go back there right now, sit on that same bench, and choose differently. Not as the abandoned mother or the wealthy benefactor, but just as yourself. And see what happens. After she left, I sat alone in my beautiful house, surrounded by all the material proof of my worth, and realized I had never felt more uncertain about my actual value in the world. I drove to Westfield Commons that afternoon, not as the abandoned mother or the wealthy property owner, but as someone trying to find clarity. The mall was busy with the usual weekday crowd, mothers with strollers, teenagers clustering around the phone store, elderly couples walking for exercise. I found my way to the same bench where this had all started, outside Bath and Body Works. Sitting there, I could see the entire food court spread out before me, bustling with life and conversation and the ordinary magic of people going about their daily business. Lionel appeared after about 20 minutes, making his rounds. When he saw me, his face lit up with genuine warmth. Mrs. Morrison! Good to see you again. How are you settling into, well, everything? Still figuring it out, I said honestly. Lionel, can I ask you something? That night when you helped me, why did you do it? He seemed surprised by the question. Because you needed help, and because, he paused, considering his words, because my mother raised me to believe that how we treat people when they can't do anything for us in return, that's who we really are. How we treat people when they can't do anything for us in return. I thought about Julia's sudden attention, After learning about my inheritance, I thought about the contract we'd signed, the performances we'd both been giving, the way we'd turned love into a transaction. Lionel, do you have children? 2 daughters, college age now. Do they call you? He smiled. Every Sunday. Sometimes just to complain about their professors or tell me about some boy they like. Nothing important, really, but they call. Nothing important. But they called anyway, because that's what people do when they genuinely care about each other. Pulled out my phone and called Julia. Mom, is everything okay? You don't usually call during the day. I'm fine. I'm sitting at the mall, actually. The same bench where you left me. Silence. Julia, I'm canceling our contract. What? Mom, we can negotiate the terms if you're not happy. No negotiation. I'm ending it completely. The payments, the scheduled visits, all of it. But why? Because I'd rather have no relationship with you than a fake one. And what we've been doing these past months isn't real. I could hear her breathing on. The other end of the line. If you want to have a relationship with me going forward, it needs to be because you choose to, not because I'm paying you to. Call me when you want to talk to me, not because it's on your calendar. Visit when you want to see me, not because you're earning a quarterly bonus. Mom, please don't do this. We can work something out. I love you, Julia. I always have, and I always will. But I won't pay you to pretend to love me back anymore. I hung up and sat quietly on the bench, watching the world go by. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt truly free. Not because I had money, but because I'd finally stopped trying to buy something that could only be given freely. I didn't know if Julia would call me tomorrow, or next week, or ever again. But for the first time since this whole journey began, I was okay with not knowing. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the freedom to choose you, even if they choose not to. She actually wanted to dance with me at all. You own that mall where this all started, Nadine continued. You could go back there right now, sit on that same bench, and choose differently. Not as the abandoned mother or the wealthy benefactor, but just as yourself. And see what happens. After she left, I sat alone in my beautiful house, surrounded by all the material proof of my worth, and realized I had never felt more uncertain about my actual value in the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.